because when God came to us, we said, we will do and we will listen. And that is a rash and impetuous act. Which is like, this is the thing about doing hermeneutics, doing interpretation. Some people could say that shows tremendous patience. I think there's a level of great patience of spirits to be able to do that. But anyway, that's not how he understood it. But and also that it's an accusation by a non-Jew to a Jew, and it's, I looked it up in the rabbinic stuff, and it's a big thing. It's interesting. Anyway, I can't really read this, but he says, but as a general comment on broader Jewish behavior, one must admit that patience is not our strong suit. There is always great pressure in the Jewish world for things and goals, the Messiah, peace, prosperity, to happen now. And in our haste to accomplish these things, we often inadvertently, but almost always surely, postpone the achievement of that goal that we so fervently and impatiently desire. That's really an interesting practice instruction, or practice thing. In short, in spite of our long history and astute wisdom, we as a people have still failed to learn, practice, and appreciate the virtue of patience in molding our national and personal character. So, I read that, I thought that was pretty interesting, and I thought, well, what people is a patient people? I don't know. Is there such a thing as a patient people? I don't know. But it is interesting, and it is interesting, I think, this thing about how you interpret stuff, because one could say, I think we are impatient for the Messiah to come, and we are impatient to the return to the land, but there is also an aspect of great patience to have that be your eschatology, to have that be really what it is you're moving towards, and you're cultivating towards. So that's an interesting thing. I liked that I learned about pizizah, which is impetuous or rash in Aramaic. In Hebrew, it's quite interesting because the word for suffering, sevel, is the same root as patient, sablanut, sablan. So it's quite interesting, right? there is this deep connection here somehow between suffering and patience. And I think that this relates a lot to what happened to me this fall, which I guess I really haven't told you that much about. When I was here in June or July, I was in a very difficult state because of behavior on our son's part that brought up all sorts of issues for me that were difficult for me to deal with. And I suffered a lot. I suffered a really, 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 really lot. And I was worried and I was anxious, and that increased my suffering. And, I was trying to practice with it and trying to really, figure it out. And I was very committed to looking at the ways in which I increased my suffering by, my son actually did pass all of his classes for 11th grade, but, in my mind, he had flunked everything. That was pretty clear. And I don't want to get into the story of Jesse, but, it was unclear whether he should have been in school. He's not in school now, actually. And so this fall, he ended up going into the mountains with a program called NOLS, National Outdoor Leadership School, for 3 months. And so I knew where he was. It was sort of after a difficult summer where I never knew where he was and what was going on with him and what he was going to do in the fall, and, having my anxiety about that. And then in the fall, he was in the Rocky Mountains. And I knew he was there, and I knew he was safe. Some people might not think that's safe, but I knew it was completely safe. So my ability to begin to reflect in a clearer way was greater. And it's not about reflecting, it's not about the clarity, it's about the anxiety level, which leads to a lot of discursive stuff. Because even with the discursive stuff, there are ways to be clear. There are lots of ways to be clear using lots of different things. But what happened was I was practicing, I only had one child at home, and that's a pretty wild thing after many years. And I was practicing, my formal meditation practice was not so different, regular sitting, but I was doing a lot of continuity of practice, and I was doing a lot of walking practice in the woods. And I was practicing tremendous, tremendous patience with myself. Because, I was so whacked out some of the time that there was pretty much little I could do. I mean, I have my obligations for where I teach, and I had to walk my dogs, and I had to be in relationship, but my life was pretty bone bare because I was only doing what I had to do, and I didn't have the creativity to want to do anything else. And what happened was I had this profound shift of self-acceptance. There was like this way in which I was present, and I was dealing with what was going on, and I could really look at it and know that it couldn't be any other way. And there was a way in which, in that process, I deeply, deeply accepted myself and my own limitations. And there was something very profound about that for me. I'm not somebody who is very patient with myself. And I have not been somebody who has been very self-accepting in a lot of ways. So as I moved through this discussion of patience, the question, Sylvia says, as I said, that we practice patience in the face of a visiting stress. So one of the questions as we work with patience is, what is our relationship to that stress? Are we trying to just wait until the stress goes away, like to get through it? Or is there something about being in the midst of the stress that we have to open up to? So as I was thinking about this and writing, this was a couple of weeks ago, it was actually the week that there was that ice storm out west, and Oklahoma was like decimated. Remember? A couple of weeks ago. And I remember hearing on the radio the mayor or the governor saying he was asking for patience on the part of all the people who had no electricity. And I thought that was interesting. And then this week when I was writing it, Benazir Bhutto was assassinated. And I imagined, I didn't hear it on the radio, I imagined people asking for patience, in dealing with these very troubling, very, very difficult situations. Or, in my situation, and Rabbi Wein actually, he must be an educator because he really raises the question of children. Our ability to cultivate patience with our children who are reckless, or provocative, or inattentive. How do we cultivate patience? How do we be patient in the face of those things? Natural disasters, assassinations, and our children. You see, I liken my children to these things. Well, gotta bring it home, right? But it is a real question on our cushions, because on our cushions, we sit there and these things come to us. They may be difficult or they may be very simple. And the question is, what is our attitude towards them? How do we understand them? You know, if we're wise, we remember on our cushion that everything that happens is impermanent.